Hello and welcome to Sports Forgotten Heroes, episode number 145, NHL Trophies. I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday season. I actually took a couple of weeks off to re-energize and get set for another exciting year of sports history podcasts. And I'm starting off by talking about who some of the NHL trophies are named after and why. A few years ago, I had a guest on, Kevin Shea, and he talked about the Stanley Cup. And not too long ago, today's guest, Eric Zweig, was here to talk about the Art Ross Memorial Trophy. Today, we're going to talk about the Lady Byng Memorial Trophy, the Hart Memorial Trophy, and the Calder Memorial Trophy. Originally, they didn't have the word memorial attached to them, but as the years passed and the people for whom the trophies were named, they became more symbolic to honor or remember them after they had passed away. Eric wrote about all of these trophies in his terrific new book, Hockey Hall of Fame, True Stories 2. And I'd like to thank the folks at Firefly Publishing for sending a copy to help me prepare for today's show. First, though, a few reminders. Please follow Sports Forgotten Heroes on X at SportsFHeroes. Look for the Sports Forgotten Heroes page on Facebook, and you can always get in touch with me by sending an email to sportsfh.info@gmail.com. That's sportsfh.info@gmail.com. And as always, I thank you for your support. And hey, since you're watching, please give Sports Forgotten Heroes a like right here and hit that subscribe button as well. Okay, let's get into today's show with my special guest, Eric Zweig, as we talk about the names on the NHL trophies. Eric, welcome back to Sports Forgotten Heroes. So glad you can join again.
It was fun last time. Glad to be back.
Yeah, last time we spoke about Art Ross, who he was, and why the trophy, the Art Ross Trophy, bears his name. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of the other trophies that are awarded in the NHL, and you covered several of them in your most recent book, True Stories 2. Why don't you tell us a tiny bit about that book and why you wrote another book for the Hall of Fame called True Stories?
Well, the original story, I guess we should go back to the first one. This is Firefly, who's a Canadian-based publisher, though they sell books in Canada and the U.S. They're generally known for their picture books. Not that sounds like for children, but like heavily illustrated books. And they decided they wanted something in their Hall of Fame series that would be more text-based and less of the photographs. So, stories. It should be stories. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, and at the time we were on a very short timeline, so there wasn't a ton of time to put it together. Though COVID got in the way and it ended up taking anyway. I thought if we're going to do these hockey stories, and especially related to the Hall of Fame, so it's, older stuff by its nature, I want to kind of dig into the true stories behind the hockey legends we've always heard that, always wonder, did it really happen that way? So that was sort of the gist of it. People sometimes like, why don't you, call one that's like untrue stories? And I say, all the other books are untrue stories. These are the true stories. And it did really well. I mean, it was a lot of fun to do, and it was quite successful when it came out. So they asked me to do another one, and I wasn't going to say no. So it was, it's a little bit different. And there weren't. I mean, I kind of used up all the good hockey legends I knew from the first time to try and get. I mean, that's not really true, but this wasn't as easy to just go, well, what's this one going to be about? So, I mean, I'd always sort of liked the idea because everybody talks about the NHL trophies and they're the best trophies in sports and they're cool. But why do they have these names? Americans seem so weirded out that the trophies are named after people. like Cy Young wasn't a person, like John Heisman wasn't a person. I mean, but they somehow find it odd that all these hockey trophies have names. So it was like, well, here are the stories behind the names. There's lots of other stuff in the book too. But that was a chapter I thought, like, if we're going to do this again, I want to tell sort of the true stories of how the trophies got their names and who they're named after and why. Because in generally speaking, they're not always named, like James Norris has nothing to do with defensemen specifically. Lady Byng is a woman in an era when there wasn't much women's hockey, but she was a big hockey fan. Like, why? And they're basically called for the people who named them. I mean, some of them are in honor. Like the Vezina Trophy was in honor of George Vezina. The Norris Trophy was actually by his family in honor of James Norris. But they are more. The names themselves have nothing to do with the trophy. They are named for the person who donated them or who they were donated in honor of. And they just happen to be, we need a trophy for this. Well, there you go. James Norris has a trophy for this. David Hart has a trophy for that. So we can talk more specifically about the ones you want to talk about. But
right.
That was like, it's always been something interesting to me. Is like, why, what are the stories? How did they happen? Where did they come from? And especially because a handful of them have been kind of, like there was the Hart Trophy. Now there's the Hart Memorial Trophy because they donated a new one. Same with Lady Byng and the Norris as well. So, or not the Norris, the Calder. It's and also, and I'm starting to talk too much without letting you get in with some questions.
Okay.
There's all the talk in recent years, especially a couple of years ago when the NHL was gearing up for its 100th anniversary, and were they going to rename the trophies? Why isn't the scoring trophy the Wayne Gretzky Trophy? Why isn't the defenseman trophy the Bobby Orr Trophy? And, there's an argument to be made for that, but these are historic names that have been part of the game since very early days in the NHL. And I, for one, would prefer they don't change them. And so far they haven't, and they've shown little appetite for it, but we'll see going on. But so I like this idea of the stories behind the names.
Well, like I said, we discussed Art Ross previously. Prior to that, I did a episode about Lord Stanley, and you cover a couple of the trophies in your new book. And I wanted to start with the Hart Trophy. Tell us about the Hart Trophy. Who was it named after, and why it was donated to the NHL?
The Hart Trophy has, even among all the trophies, a somewhat unique angle, and like the person it's named for has almost nothing to do with hockey, though his son did. David Hart is the donor of the Hart Trophy. His son, Cecil Hart, was a long time involved in the front office with Montreal Canadiens. He coached them for quite a while, but even before that, he had been sort of instrumental in management of the team. He had actually, when Leo Danderin and Joseph Katarinich bought the team in 1921, he had been sort of their surrogate, standing in at the auction and made the deal to get the team for them for $11,000. That was a pretty good investment on your $11,000. It was 100 and something years ago, but still. So in 1923, and it's interesting that David Hart, or Cecil Hart rather, at this point he's sort of behind the scenes with the Canadiens, but he's been involved in sort of management at hockey levels for amateur teams in the city of Montreal since he was literally a kid. Like from the time he was 13 or 14 years old, he was organizing baseball teams. He started actually as baseball was his first sort of true love, it seems. And he had organized a baseball team in Montreal. Like, as I say, like when he was literally like 14 years old, he was managing this team in the Quebec Provincial League. And over the years, a lot of hockey people would play there. Lester Patrick played there, or in that league anyway. Art Ross played for his team for sure. Sprague and Odie Cleghorn played for the Stars. He eventually moves into hockey as well. So that by the time he's involved with the Canadiens in the early 1920s, he's not a well-established NHL guy, but in Montreal, he is a big name in hockey management, hockey, leagues and teams. And at his 40th birthday in 1923, his father, and as I say, by now he is working with the Canadiens, though he's kind of a behind-the-scenes guy. His father announces at his birthday party, I'm going to donate a trophy to the NHL. It's funny that, it's named the David Hart. Like, he doesn't donate it in honor of his son. He donates it in his name. But to the league his son is now, significantly involved with. And apparently he had in the past in another Montreal City league that his son Cecil had been involved with. He had either planned to or actually did donate a trophy for the leading goal scorer. And it sounds like when he intends to donate the Hart Trophy originally, he wants to donate it to the leading scorer. Though it does sound like, because it's funny in the paper, that it said, I see you have a question, but I'm just going to rattle on anyway. That it says in the paper he intends it to be for the leading, goals and assistants, which I assume has to mean assists. So he wanted it to be for the scoring leader, but is kind of talked out of it.
Yeah, so you talk about that in the book, how it was originally intended for the leading goal scorer, but Hart wanted it for something bigger, something more. He wanted it for the league's most valuable player.
Yeah, well, it sounds like, as I say, like he wanted it to be for the scoring leader, like goals and assistants. And Leo Dandaran apparently is the one, at least in Dandaran's own biography of Dandaran several years later, says that he told Hart, it's a good idea, but it really does kind of limit it to forwards. If you give it to the leading goal scorer or point scorer, it's going to be forwards over defensemen and goalies. It also might encourage puck hogging, basically. Like guys are going to be, which I think probably would never have been true. But it might encourage more selfish play and less team play. If you give it to the most valuable player, it is available to anybody on the team, regardless of their position. And I guess that made sense to him, because it seems like from the time he originally presents it to Frank Calder, the president of the NHL, which is now, so this originally happened at Hart's birthday in November of 23. It's January of 24 and into February and March when he's making the case to the league. And it does sound like right from the time he goes to the league with it, it is for the most valuable player. And the league jumps on it. They like the idea. They don't have any trophies at this point. There aren't any individual honors in the NHL. There's just the Stanley Cup. And even at this time, the Stanley Cup isn't exclusively an NHL trophy. So it's not a guarantee that an NHL team will win it. So they seem to really like the idea of this individual. And it does seem like the most valuable player award seems like a fitting one to be your league's first trophy. So all is good.
One of the things that I found interesting was about Frank Calder. I thought, for whatever reason, he was somewhat ahead of his time, in that I thought it was pretty unique that he suggested the way to come up with the winner of the Hart Trophy was to get two writers from every city that has a team vote on the MVP. I thought that was pretty unique. Talk about that.
Well, I mean, it is his suggestion that that's how they're going to do it. And I think he writes to David Hart and says, this is what we're going to do. I'm trying to think, because at the time, there is a short-lived baseball MVP trophy in both. I think it's separate for each league and run by the leagues themselves, not Major League Baseball. But I'm not sure how the voting worked in that one. But so it's possible. I don't know. It's possible that Calder just took the idea because that's what baseball's doing. It's possible he thought of it separately, even if that is what baseball was doing. But yeah, that was his idea on how we were going to do it. And it's interesting because as we get to some of the other trophies, it's a similar but different procedure by then. Like he specifically wrote to newspaper guys in each of I think there's only 4 at the time. There are 4 NHL cities at the time. And so there'll be 2 from each. So there's 8 people voting on it. But he specifically wrote to the people he wanted at the papers and said, I think they had a free hand at that point, but he selected who he wanted to vote for. So it's kind of neat. He was very hands-on, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, the first winner of the Hart Trophy was Frank, and I hope I get this right, Nyborg.
Nyberg, how I've always heard it.
Yeah, okay, Frank Nyberg. And he won the Hart Trophy in a very close race over Sprague Cleghorn. Who was Frank Nyberg? Tell us a little bit more about his game, and most importantly, why he won over Sprague.
Yeah, well, because there's in the story I've got, or in the book rather, I've got that story that Elmer Ferguson, who is a Montreal guy, and Nyberg is is Ottawa and Cleghorn was Montreal, writing why he thought it should be Cleghorn. But I mean, Nyber, he's not a name that's well known anymore. In his younger days, he had been a really high scorer. As he gets older, he's really recognized as the top defensive forward of his time. He's credited sometimes as at least one of the people who invented either the poke check or the hook check. But he was well known as the NHL's best defensive forward. And at this point, he does seem to, like as I say, in his younger days, before in the NHA, before the NHL, he was a top goal scorer, like a guy who could score 40 goals in a 20-game season and compete for the scoring award every year, though there's no award. The scoring honor, I guess, every year. He's now more of a defensive specialist. But the thing is, Ottawa was kind of like the New Jersey Devils of their heyday. Ottawa was a team that, especially in an era that was very offensive, they emphasized defense. And they won. I mean, they won the Stanley Cup in 2021, 23, and 27. And I'm though they haven't won the Cup yet in 23. I mean, Ottawa is the best team in the league. He's the leader of the best team in the league. Like if you look at his numbers now, which is all we can really look at, it's hard to go, why that guy? But at the time, I mean, it wasn't, I mean, as I say, Elmer Ferguson, a Montreal guy, was supporting a Montrealer, but, Nyber was a good choice. And he was, like, I'm trying to think who he would be comparable to that we all know now. I mean, a guy like Jonathan Toews, say, versus, a Connor McDavid, or even Crosby, I guess, like a guy who was just an all-around tremendous player, not necessarily the flashiest superstar.
I actually thought in a way of a Messier type player.
Yeah. Same kind of thing, like a team leader who did what was best for the team rather than his own individual statistics, I guess. But I mean, not that I'm trying to cast any blame on McDavid. I'm a big Connor McDavid fan, so.
He played for Ottawa for 13 years.
Yeah, a lot.
Won several championships, Stanley Cups, scored, I think I looked it up, it was like 139 goals and had 100 assists over the course of his career. And I thought one of the cool stats was, if I read this correctly, over the course of his career, he had 26 game-winning goals. So he was pretty clutch. So obviously we can't say he didn't deserve it, but it was a close race with Sprague Cleghorn, and he won the first ever one. Tell us about the trophy itself. Tell us about the fact that the original is no longer awarded and a replacement was created after 1960. Tell us about the actual
physical trophy. I won't bother holding it up because I'm sure you'll have some images to show. It was a very kind of classic trophy-looking trophy, like it's got the handles to hold it from the side. It's not as juggy as some of the classic trophies, but it looks like a trophy. It looks like something you'd give to the, the student body president kind of thing. I mean, it's a trophy. And it's mounted on a nice wooden base, and it has room for plaques on it for the names of winners. And it happens that it has 9, like 3 sets of 3, like a tic-tac-toe layout on each of its 4 sides of the base. So 36 years later, it's filled up. And at that point, when the NHL has more trophies and somewhat more elegant trophies, in modern days, they've just built bigger bases when the trophy runs out of space, or the Stanley Cup actually, physically got bigger. But it was Clarence Campbell at the time decided, we should have a more elegant, like a trophy that actually makes you go, ooh, ah, when you just look at the actual trophy. So that was why. And at that, like David Hart has been dead for quite some time. I mean, he died in 1928, I think. So it had been a memorial trophy in a sense for a long time. But when they redo it in 1960, they specifically call it the Hart Memorial Trophy. And it's now in honor of him. And it's this new, they've designed it, if you've ever seen it, it looks like a flaming torch. Like that's what it was designed to look like. It's pretty cool. It's not, like as I say, the original Hart Trophy was very trophy-like. And this one is sort of a sculpture. I mean, it couldn't be much more different.
Mhm. Here's a cool little note that you brought up. Hart suggested that the trophy be awarded permanently if the player were to win it 3 times.
Yeah,
Howie Morenz won it 3 times, but it wasn't given to him
no.
permanently. Why?
Well, yeah, there's no real answer to that. I mean, the trophy right on it, I was looking at the picture and trying to blow it up. Like right on it, it says not to become the permanent possession of any one player until it's won 3 times, which was a fairly standard trophy thing of that era. You know, championship trophies, individual trophies, like if you win it 3 times, it's yours. It's possible, even though it doesn't say it, it's possible it was intended for 3 consecutive seasons and therefore nobody won it at that point. But it does just say 3. And it's interesting that not only is Howie Morenz the first guy to win it 3 times, Howie Morenz was a particular favorite of Cecil Hart. He had been the one who went to Stratford and recruited him for the Canadiens, basically. And he was the coach for much of Morenz's heyday in Montreal, and it's always said that Hart never had any children and considered Howie Morenz practically to be a son. So you'd think if anybody was going to take permanent possession of it, Howie Morenz would make sense. The only thing I can think of is that it was kind of understood that it was meant 3 consecutive years, and Morenz never did that. But I don't know. That's just conjecture, because I think some of the other trophies of that era that have the 3 rule is 3 in a row. So, as I say, maybe at that time people just understood you meant 3 in a row when you said you have to win it 3 times. But that's just me guessing 100 years later, so can't know.
Well, that would make some sense.
Yes,
so that's the Hart Trophy. How about the Lady Byng? First of all, who was Lady Byng?
Yeah, that's another interesting one in that, like, I have that quote from Alex Del Vecchio saying, "It's nice to win, but that name is kind of hard to take."
Yeah, I mean, he sort of alludes to or intones that it's almost embarrassing.
Yeah, and it's possible. I mean, that's partly the fact that it's a trophy for sportsmanship in a very rough and tumble game. So that, just being that is a little bit, in a macho, less enlightened era, kind of sissified to win it to begin with. And the fact that it's called the Lady, I mean, this is sort of, when my brother was a little boy, he thought it was actually the Lady Byng Trophy. And it was like, being ladylike. And like, how embarrassing would that be? So I mean, I think NHL players might have not felt that much differently than a 7-year-old boy. That, I don't want to be a lady. Why am I getting this? But she was the wife of the Governor General of Canada at the time. It's quite interesting to me that when she was a young girl, her father had been the secretary to another Governor General of Canada. So she'd actually lived in Canada as an 8-year-old girl from England this is like in the 1870s. And she comes back to Canada in the 1920s as a grown woman, married to the man who has now been appointed Governor General of Canada. And Byng had been a British Army officer for years, led the Canadian troops in World War I, is famous in Canada for being the sort of architect behind the Vimy Ridge battle that Canada, that is a big battle in Canadian history. I think Americans and even the Brits, European history, it's nothing. But in Canada, it is like the coming of age moment of Canadian Confederation. That Canadian troops won this ridge in a battle that had been for years had been unwinnable. And it wasn't, in the long run, it had very little strategical advantage. But at the time, it was like, we took it. France couldn't, England couldn't, Germany couldn't hold it against us. It was a huge morale-boosting Canadian victory. He is the sort of hero of Vimy. He is known as Baron Byng of Vimy. It even says on the original trophy, like, she is Lady Byng of Vimy. So, I mean, it's funny, like, if they had called it maybe the Viscountess of Vimy Trophy, which is a weird name too, but it's not quite as being a lady as the Lady Byng Trophy. But she was a huge hockey fan. Like, she came to Canada.
You wrote about, you said how big a hockey fan she is.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Well, that's the strange. So she talks about, like, when she was a girl in Ottawa as an 8-year-old, 9-year-old. It's before, in fact, hockey has been sort of brought to Ottawa. There's no kind of known hockey yet in Ottawa in the 1870s when she's a girl. And she talks about tobogganing, and that was the big winter sport. They had a big toboggan run at Rideau Hall, where the Governor General lived, and so she would talk about that, like being in the snow and playing with the toboggans. But when she comes to Canada in 1921, and she's not seen much hockey that we're aware of in England, and she talks about how, it was a big loss to her that there wasn't the theater culture in Ottawa that there was in London, in England. I mean, England was really the center of the world at this time. So she said, like, I missed a theater scene, but man, I love going to the hockey games on a Saturday night. She just really, and it's funny that, you might think, oh, she liked the rough and the tumble, but she wanted to encourage sportsmanship. That was the point of her trophy. Though it's interesting, like in her book, where she writes about that she loves, like, she doesn't talk about how she doesn't like the rough stuff. She doesn't like the way the fans behave. What she doesn't like specifically is when they get angry and throw stuff on the ice, which is, sensible because it's dangerous to throw stuff on the ice. But she never talks about the trophy in any sense of encouraging better behavior among the fans. She wants to encourage more sportsmanlike play among the players. And yeah, it was important to her. But she was a big fan. Like, she went to all the games when she was in Ottawa. There's the famous story, like, they go back to Ottawa in 1926. And in the 26-27 season, Ottawa wins the Stanley Cup. And she's apparently following it back home in London because she sends a telegram on the night they win the Stanley Cup. So she's following it, like, say hi to the boys and give them our best. We're glad they won, kind of thing. So she was a big fan. It's too bad that people kind of think of her trophy as a sissy thing and make fun of her name. But, it's a weird macho sport.
It's interesting because it is a trophy that is awarded for clean play, if there's such a thing as clean play in the NHL. Ironically, Frank Niber, who won the first Hart Trophy, as we were just talking about, he also won the first Lady Byng. But it was controversial that he did win it. Talk about that. He was actually awarded the first trophy, the first Lady Byng, after he was invited to, for lack of a better term, inspect the trophy. She wanted to get his take on it. She said, well, here it is. It's for you. For sure there's a little bit weird controversy in how it was handed out. And that story is the story that the NHL tells on the website, that she invited him to Government House and said, I'm thinking of this. What do you think of the trophy? And he went, that's good. It makes sense to me. And she said, here you go. It's for you. But it doesn't, like, reading the newspapers at the time, it didn't quite happen. I mean, it's possible that all happened behind the scenes, but she still goes to the NHL. Like, there's newspaper stories as it's happening that she has gone to Frank Calder and discussed, this is what I want to do. Here's the trophy I intend to donate. And this is what I want it for. And the league goes, okay. And this is right at the end of the season. And then it's not handed out right away. Like, the Hart Trophy is handed out for the second year, not to him this year, in the interim. And then suddenly, a week or two later, there's an exhibition game in Ottawa after the season, and the Senators we are going to present the trophy to Niber on the ice tonight. And she's like, okay. And then there's all these stories about why Niber. Like, he's not the guy who really warranted it this year. There were guys who had better years than him, more sportsmanlike years than him. Why him? So it does seem very clear that perhaps Lady Byng wanted him to have it. But it's not quite true that she just said, here you go, Frank, it's yours. And the interesting thing is, so they talk about why wasn't there a vote? Why, like, apparently the league just went, all right, Niber, it's yours. Unlike the year before, where Calder had taken great pains to set up the vote. But the second year,
there's a vote. Like, it's the similar kind of vote. And he wins it then. And he is more deserving of it that year than he would have been the first year. It's a little bit odd. But, yeah, it's possible she just wanted it and the league kind of worked its way around it. But it doesn't quite sound like she just invited him to tea and said, here's a trophy. Yeah, it's yours. But she could have.
What was it about Frank Niber that she liked so much? Was it his style of play?
Yeah, it must have been. I mean, she doesn't write about that either, but I mean, she obviously valued, and it's funny, like, he doesn't get no penalty minutes. Like, even that, when he wins it in the vote, like I say in the book, it's like, you look at the numbers, like Carson Cooper on Boston looks like a better guy. He had a couple more goals and fewer penalties. So I don't think Niber was like super duper clean. He just
he had. I looked it up before before we got together tonight. He overall for his career, it's not an exorbitant amount, but still, he had 266 penalties a minute.
I mean, he wasn't squeaky clean. But I think she appreciated, as we said, like the leadership, the fact that the team kind of took its tone from him, that he was the captain of her favorite team. I mean, so, yeah, I mean, I think it's probably true that she wanted him to have it, but I also think it's not quite that she just arranged it solely for him.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
But, yeah, I mean, I think she admired him, and he was the leader of the team. And, I mean, clearly, even if she went to every game in Ottawa, she was an Ottawa fan before she was a fan of the other teams. So, you know, maybe there's a bit of shenanigans there, but he's not. I mean, it's funny that year is his weakest year of his career for sure. So he probably didn't really warrant it for that year, but I think she probably thought of it more as a career reward than this is for you for this season. But I don't know. I'm just guessing again.
Well, like we said, he was more deserving of it in year 2, and he won it. We talked about Del Vecchio when we first started talking about the Lady Byng. How do today's players feel about the Lady Byng?
I think they still feel the same way he did. I think it's. I mean, for a little while, it became almost like a consolation. Like, you're not quite the most valuable player, but you deserve something trophy. I don't know. I think, I mean, the game's not as violent right now as it had been for many years, so maybe it's. But yeah, I think it still has a bit of a connotation of winning, which is too bad, because, I mean, she wanted it for sportsmanship, like, not necessarily, like, it does, you know, talk about clean play. Like, she didn't want, I don't think she expected guys to be wimpy. She just wanted them to not be dirty. I mean, so.
Well, here's a good question for you. What are the qualifications for the Hart Trophy, the Hart Memorial? What are the qualifications to win the Hart Memorial?
Well, I don't know that there are, like, honest to God criteria. It's just, it's actually been, like it says, for most valuable to his team, which is different than being the best player in the league, though it generally goes to the best player in the league. There's a handful of years where you look at the thing and go, why did that guy win? In the mid 50s, it's like the only time they really seem to take seriously most valuable to your team, as opposed to best player in the league. But it's generally become the best player in the league trophy.
I think really, if you think about it, there might only be, 3 trophies in hockey that are actually awarded based on a particular criteria that automatically gets you the trophy. And that would be the Ross, right? For the highest score, that's goals and assists combined. I believe the Rocket Richard Awards given to the league's leading goal scorer.
Yep.
And the Stanley Cup goes to the team.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Jennings Trophy, and this is what, it's funny, when the Vezina Trophy started, I mean, people always talk about it like it is now the most valuable goalie, and it is voted
to the guy who has best goals against average.
Yeah. Though, but even like in the early days, similar to what the Jennings is now, it was for the goalie on the team that allowed the fewest goals. That's what the Jennings is. But it always, even though it was always that, it was always kind of treated like the most valuable goalie trophy, which is what it has become. And it's interesting that we didn't talk about this, but the fact that Dan Duran thought if you have it for scorers, it precludes defensemen and goalies. It's interesting that even still, and before there were specific, like goalies and defensemen win it way fewer times to Hart than the forwards do. So it definitely became a kind of best player as opposed to valuable.
Has a goalie won the Hart?
Yeah, no, it's happened. There's was it 7 goalies have won it 8 times because Hasek won it twice, but not a lot.
Right. Going back to the Lady Byng, talk about Frank Boucher. How many times did he win it, and what happened to the trophy?
Yeah, it's funny too that you look at the actual original Lady Byng trophy is a pretty squat, ugly little trophy, which is why they replace it later. But be that as it may, and it is kind of a squat, ugly trophy. Frank Boucher won the trophy 6 times in a 7-year stretch, or 7 times in an 8-year stretch, and he's never actually seen the trophy. Like I have the cartoon in the newspaper that he'd won it 6 times and had never seen it because there wasn't an awards presentation like there was. There were miniatures. Like I think he'd been given those miniatures, though maybe he was given those later. But anyway, after he wins it 6 times in 7 years, and there's an event in Ottawa. It's a little bit strange. Like he actually is presented with it for the first time ever after his win in 1935. There's an event in Ottawa, and he's at it. He's from Ottawa, and they present him with the trophy. And a writer in the Ottawa, one of the Ottawa newspapers, it's just his column for the day, but writes this kind of open letter to Lady Byng, going, you might, now that you're back in England and probably not following hockey as closely as you once did, you might be surprised to learn that in the ensuing years that this one particular guy just wins it year in and year out, and says you might consider actually giving him the award outright.
So there you go. So they finally do give the trophy to someone who won it so many times. By the way, it was 7 times in 8 years.
7 times in 8 years. Okay.
I just looked it up. But here's the thing. They finally give it to somebody. They retire the trophy. Wow, what a mistake.
Well, they gave him the trophy, and she immediately donated a new one. The same kind of squat, ugly one, like the exact same trophy again. He is given the trophy to keep. And yes, years later, he has it, and he always talks about, one of these days I will give it to the Hockey Hall of Fame. And he has the miniatures for all the times he's won, and he's apparently got these great paintings and these trophies he's won as a great New York Ranger star. And he lives, like I say, he's living out west, but is in a farm near Ottawa where his family is. There's a big fire and the farm burns and all the trophies and all the stuff is destroyed. So the original Lady Byng trophy is lost in this fire. Yeah, it's funny because I'd always used this. I didn't know that story until, it's not like it was a hidden thing. I didn't uncover it, but I just personally didn't know the story. And I used to wonder where it happened. Like if he was given to it, what happened to it? What happened to it? And then it was like, oh, look, there was this fire and it got destroyed. But so there was, like, as I said, like immediately, like after she gives him the original trophy to keep, that summer she donates a brand new one. And so the league, it continues on. And as I say, it's the same kind of squat, ugly little trophy. And then when she dies in 1949, and again, the NHL's website kind of makes it sound like immediately upon her dying, the league decides we should donate a better, nicer, fancier trophy in her honor. So it actually took almost 2 years after she died. Not that it really matters. And the Lady Byng trophy currently is quite an elegant, beautiful trophy, unlike the squat cup that she had actually donated originally.
And it's the Hart Memorial, and this is the Byng Memorial.
Yeah. For sure, the fact that she was dead was why there's the new trophy and it has the new name. But it did take them. It didn't happen instantly.
Well, we mentioned his name earlier, Frank Calder. Tell us about the Calder Trophy. Tell us a little bit about its history and what that trophy is awarded for.
Yeah, well, the Calder Trophy is for the Rookie of the Year. So this will go back a little bit when I was talking about the votes. Like Frank Calder, who had initiated the vote on the sports writers for the Hart and then the Lady Byng, and by 1930-31, the Canadian press decides it is going to poll all of its sports writers annually to choose the NHL All-Star team at the end of the season. Not like the team that plays in the All-Star game, the award, the first team All-Star, second team All-Star.
Sort of like football's all-pro team.
Yeah, the all-pro, yeah. And baseball doesn't have anything comparable, though I think they've started to. Basketball has one, too. But it's different than the All-Star game. It is the All-Star team. So they start doing that in 30-31. In the 32-33 season, added to their poll, they also decide to select a Rookie of the Year. Like the Canadian press decides this independently of the NHL. The NHL's happy, it seems like it, to go along. So there's, for a handful of years, in 33, 34, 35, 36, there is a poll selecting the Rookie of the Year in the NHL. But they don't receive anything. I mean, they might, I can't remember if there's even a cash bonus. They receive the honor. People know it's in the paper. Congratulations, you're the Rookie of the Year. But apparently, Conn Smythe in Toronto and one of the Toronto sports writers puts this bug in Calder's ear. Like, there should be a trophy for this, and you should donate it. So he does. He commissions a trophy. It's quite a pretty trophy by the ugly squat early trophy standards. But still, it's going to be the winner in the Canadian press poll who's going to receive the trophy. And Sil Apps of the Maple Leafs is the winner. And so Calder decides, it's actually, I haven't seen Sil Apps is from a town, Paris, Ontario, which is funny. There's Paris and a London in Ontario, and they're not too far from each other. Apps is from Paris, and that summer, the Kiwanis Club, I think, in Paris is honoring Apps. And Calder decides he's going to come and present his trophy to Apps. And he decides on the train. So by this time, there is the Vezina Trophy for the best goalie. There's the Hart Trophy. But that's all there is at that point. But then there's the All-Star team annually. But Calder decides on the train, apparently, from Montreal to Toronto and then to Paris, that this is a trophy that a guy can never win again. You can only be a rookie once. I should give it to him to keep. And he does. He presents the trophy like, it's yours to keep. Congratulations. Here is your trophy. But it seems to be a big hit, so he's going to commission one every year. And he does. Like the next handful of years, whoever is voted the Calder Trophy winner, or the Rookie of the Year, Calder commissions a trophy. Probably the same trophy, it sounds like the same design. Like, just go back to the same trophy company in Montreal and go, make me another one of those. But put this guy's name on it. But then Calder died. I guess everybody kind of dies suddenly and unexpectedly, but he dies suddenly and unexpectedly while still the commissioner or the president of the league. And it's only then that the rest of the league, which is kind of dumb, but it seems to be very true. Like, when he dies, Merv Dutton, who had been a player and is now kind of running the New York Americans, he is appointed to be the kind of caretaker president of the league. And he writes to all the other league guys and says, did you know that Calder bought this trophy on his own every year and presented it to the guy? Do you think we should keep doing this? And everybody goes, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. We should keep doing this. So for a couple of years, he continues to commission the same trophy. And then, so this was in the early 40s when Calder died. And a few years later, I think it's by 45 or so, the NHL decides we should, rather than do this, we should be like the other trophies. We will create a trophy. We will call it the Calder Memorial Trophy. You won't get to keep it, but it will be perpetuated every year in honor of our founding president and in his name. And the rest of the league goes, yeah, that's a good idea. And so now they have a permanent trophy that, nobody gets to keep. But by this point, they do have the little miniature replicas guys. So you are presented with a little version of the trophy. And there are some of those kicking around. But that's how the Rookie of the Year trophy started.
What I find interesting about the Calder is this. The eligibility,
Yeah.
rookie eligibility has changed or did change several times
Yeah.
over the years. And what I mean by that is a guy like Sergei Makarov, who was so established overseas, right, in the KHL with the Russians, I believe that's what it was
Yeah.
called. He was an established professional. He was not 19 or 20 years old when he came over to the NHL and won the trophy with the Calgary Flames. There were other guys as well. Whereas a guy like Wayne Gretzky,
Yeah.
who's won every single award you can imagine, with the exception of one, the
Yes. And I
Calder,
think,
and that's because he played in the
yeah.
WHA and
Yeah.
came
Well,
over.
that's,
Doesn't make sense.
no, it doesn't really make sense. I think that was a real screw you from the NHL to the WHA, not to Wayne Gretzky specifically. But yeah, like they were very adamant about that. He has played as a professional. Though on the other hand, the guys in Russia technically didn't play as professionals. Though he was, yeah, he's 26 years old and he's played 8 seasons of the highest, like in the second highest league in the history of hockey. And they don't make him ineligible. Though they decide after that we won't do this again. But yeah, but it is interesting that originally you had to be what they referred to as a true rookie. You couldn't have played at all in any previous season. Even 1 minute of ice time is supposed to, make you ineligible to be the rookie of the year. Though it's interesting that even in that vote for Silafs, that a couple of guys who get votes had played. So it's like the guys either didn't enforce the rules or didn't understand the rules. But for many years, it was that you couldn't play at all. Then they decided, all right, if you played 3 games, less than 3 games, you're still a rookie. And then it keeps kind of going up. Like currently, it's 25 games in one season, or it's a weird number. It's like 6 games over several seasons. But they've made an idea of like what disqualifies you for a rookie and what doesn't.
But you can play in the playoffs. You
Yes.
could actually be a rookie.
Like Ken Dryden.
Yeah, you could win. I'm sorry, I can't think of the name of the trophy for.
Conn Smythe Trophy. Yeah, I mean,
you could win the Conn Smythe Trophy as the most valuable player in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and the next season win the Calder.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I guess the only thing you can say about that is that when Dryden played that whole rookie, he only played 20 games. Like it wasn't 25. But I don't think that's what the number is. I think it's just like playoffs don't count for some reason, which seems odd. Like if there's a number of games that limits you, why doesn't it count playoffs? But it didn't, because the first time this comes up is Gay Stewart in 1945, I guess, who has he had been up with the Leafs in the playoffs the year before and it only played a little bit. And it's like, no, I guess it's in 42 or 43 because it's the last ruling Calder makes. Is that like, well, it wouldn't really be fair, like especially as his rookie year is developing and he's clearly the guy who should win this trophy. It's like it doesn't seem fair to disqualify him because he played in a couple of playoff games. So let's say it doesn't. So that's the last ruling he makes as an NHL president before he dies. And then they start futzing with the rules over the course of time. I mean, I think it makes sense that it shouldn't disqualify you if you play a handful of games. And I guess 25 is the number they decided on. But yeah, it's odd because Dryden decided he didn't play 20 games in the playoffs, but he played 6 games in the season and 20 in the playoffs. So combined, it would have been enough to make him ineligible if it had been during the season. I wonder if Ken has any thoughts on that. I'm guessing he feels quite proud of how he won that.
Well, Eric, we touched upon the Hart, we touched upon the Byng, we touched upon Calder. Well, we spoke about all 3 of those. Previously, you and I spent quite some time talking about the Art Ross Trophy.
Yeah.
I've done a show on the Stanley, on Lord Stanley's Cup. In this episode, we touched upon the Norris, we touched upon the Vezina. We just talked about Conn Smythe. We also hit upon the Jennings. There's 2 other trophies,
Okay.
Selke and the Jack Adams. Tell us about those 2 trophies.
Well, those ones and some of the others too, like the Conn Smythe Trophy, was created by the ownership of the Maple Leafs and the brass that ran the Leafs and Maple Leaf Gardens in honor of Smythe when he sort of stepped down from his role of chairman of the board in Toronto. So it was an honor for him. It has nothing to do with, like he's not a playoff MVP. It's just like, well, this is a trophy that we don't have, and this will fit it nicely. So the other ones now, are now kind of just, we're going to honor somebody who deserves an honor, and we'll create a trophy for it. The Jack Adams Trophy is for the Coach of the Year. And Adams coached and was general manager of the Red Wings for a long time. Though at this point,
had a division named after him.
Yeah. But I mean, if you're flat out going for like a guy who deserves his name on the trophy for the best coaches, maybe Topolay. It could have been him. I don't think the Red Wings put it forward the way like the Toronto Maple Leafs did put the Conn Smythe Trophy forward. I don't believe the Red Wings were lobbying for Adams, but I mean, he was a decent choice because he was a long-time NHL coach. It's a bit of a gas, but so many of these NHL guys were. That doesn't disqualify you. The Selke one again is sort of like, we should honor Frank Selke. What needs a trophy? Best defensive forward. Okay. And it's interesting that, so many Montreal guys, Bob Gainey won it all at the beginning, so it all seems like a fitting Montreal kind of thing. But yeah, that was just the league deciding, like now it is kind of a thing in the league. We name our trophies after people that have they could have, but there wasn't, like they could have called the Selke Trophy the Claude Provost Trophy because he was the kind of Bob Gainey of his day. He was like acknowledged as they could have called it the Frank Niber Trophy, who was acknowledged as the best defensive forward of his day. But it's like, Frank Selke deserves an honor. Let's give him this. And I got no problem with that. So, and the Adams one, and the Jennings Trophy again, like he was just an executive behind the scenes.
Right.
He's an odd one because like he's not even a guy people knew. Like at least Adams and Selke were kind of front and center with their, like Jennings is such a kind of behind the scenes bean counter kind of guy with both the Rangers and the NHL. I mean, not saying he's not worthy of something, but he's a strange one. Like he's just like that guy. We're going to honor that guy. Like that was less apparent than some of the others.
Should have named it the Gump Worsley Award or something.
Yeah, something. Or Jacques Plante or Sacha.
Yeah, exactly.
But then again, like that's like I was saying, if they decided, not to get Eric Ross anymore at the Wayne Gretzky Trophy, I'd be the first one like, that's not right. But again, if you called it the Sacha Trophy right off the bat, like the Vezina, I mean, the Vezina really is, geez, this guy died, he was a great goalie, we're going to name a goalie trophy after him. Sure. Like if the same thing had happened when Sacha had died in 71, they said, now's the time to rethink this. That would have made sense.
Well, Eric, I want to thank you again for joining me on Sports Forgotten Heroes. It's quite an entertaining hour we've spent together. A lot of fun, a lot of history, and I hope people get something out of this. I know got great comments on the Art Ross show, and I hope you get the same again. There's your book.
The book it's very, it's old time hockey. I mean, it's the stuff that I like. So it's there's plenty of history. And it's funny that the cover has more modern guys because they're the color people you get pictures of. They're all in the book, but it is some real old-time hockey. And if you're a fan of this stuff, these are the books for you.
Yeah, I got mine. It's a great book. I look forward to having you back on. What are you going to work on next?
More hockey, more trivia, more behind-the-scenes, old weird stuff. Though this one will probably cover not quite as old and esoteric, but we'll see what happens.
Cool. Well, thank you again for joining me on Sports Forgotten Heroes.
Thank you.
I think it's pretty cool how the NHL has named its trophies to help carry on the legacy of many of its past stars and for people who donated the trophies for certain accomplishments. I do think, however, there could be room for more. There has got to be a way to name a trophy for Wayne Gretzky, to name a trophy for Bobby Orr, to name a trophy for Gordie Howe. Maybe, as time goes on, the NHL will figure it out. Once again, Thanks to my guest, Eric Zweig, for joining me on this episode of Sports Forgotten Heroes. And thanks to all of you for watching, and I'll see you next time on Sports Forgotten Heroes.